Welcome to Restaurant Relevance, the podcast, where the goal is to glean operational tactics for restaurant operators from data-driven research. Definitely nerding out along the way. I'm Nathan Jarvis, your host. Welcome to those of you who are tuning in. Before we dive into the show, here are the highlights and key takeaways. Definitely, the perceptions of authenticity matter, and it impacts both the perceptions of quality as well as the satisfaction of the dining experience there. That satisfaction of the experience can lead to it being memorable, and being memorable can lead to positive word of mouth. Obviously, word of mouth marketing is one of the best kinds out there. At least from what I've seen and learned. I'm not a marketing guru, but having people talk positively about your operation is a really positive thing that I absolutely should be aware of. Risks that consumers might consider, and for a food truck, it seems like the primary one is the hygiene risk, or food safety type things, which most operators I've come in contact with do a really good job of that. It seems like it's mostly about making sure that your guests are aware of that. So there's that the perception there about handling food safety well. And when it comes to whether this data could be applied to other models, whether it's brick and mortar or virtual brands, etc., while it makes intuitive sense that some of the findings about authenticity would apply, we don't really know. That's data that needs to be collected. And certainly if you're an operator listening to this and you'd like to collaborate, or another researcher you'd like to collaborate with these authors, reach out, because they would be open to that. In this episode, we're featuring research published in the International Journal of Hospitality Management entitled "How Do Authenticity and Quality Perceptions Affect Dining Experiences and Recommendations of Food Trucks? The Moderating Role of Perceived Risk." I'm super fascinated to have the authors on the show today to hear about their research for a couple of reasons. One, food trucks definitely have been popular over the past 15 or so years. In many metropolitan areas, they've already hit a number of peaks, and now the market is filling out. There's a lot of competition, and so research on how to optimize your operation best is definitely important. The other thing that really intrigues me is the authenticity piece regarded to the food, and how people assess whether a food truck is authentic and what that means for whether they're satisfied or not. So we have Mr. Kian Shafizadeh is with us as a PhD candidate in the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management at Oklahoma State University. He has more than 6 years of industry experience across different hospitality and tourism sectors, including hotels, restaurants, travel, and events. And his main research streams focus on sustainable development, empowerment of underrepresented groups, and consumer behavior in the hospitality and tourism field. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. That's my pleasure to be a part of the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you. And we also have Dr. Willie Tao, who is an assistant professor at the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management in the Spear School of Business at Oklahoma State University. His research focuses on food service management, social media research, and big data analytics. Besides research, he enjoys teaching and cultivating the future leaders of our industry. Food is the language he speaks, and travel is his favorite exercise. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nathan. What a wonderful world, right? With food and travel. And thanks for having us today.
You're very welcome. Yes, hospitality is a wonderful world, and I'm delighted I still get to be a part of it as an educator, and y'all as researchers. So I want to start off at a kind of what I call a 30,000 foot viewpoint, an overview level. In 2 or 3 sentences, would you describe for us what your study was about and what y'all found?
Sure. So before I start, I want to thank we have another co-author, Dr. Alutabi, who is an assistant professor in King Saud University, but he couldn't join today, but I just want to thank him as well. As you mentioned, the main purpose of our study was about helping ethnic food trucks to grow, right? Previous studies show that creating a memorable dining experience creates many positive outcomes for different companies, different sectors, especially in the hospitality sector. So the main purpose of our study was to know how ethnic food trucks can create a memorable dining experience for their customers. And also, since perceived risk has an important role in the street food context, so we want to know how or if perceived risk can play a role in the proposed relationship in our study. These were the main purpose of our study.
Awesome. And so why this research and why now? I love hearing origin stories of how you got to the research. Obviously, food trucks have been around for quite a while, but why did you decide to study this?
So as you mentioned, food trucks are growing, right? They are growing even faster than restaurant sector nowadays. The main reason is that new generation, especially millennial, they like to try authentic and at the same time affordable food. So they are growing. Right. And at the same time, starting a food truck is much easier or needed less capital than brick and mortar restaurants. So that's why, especially immigrants of a destination, people from ethnic minorities, they start a food truck and serve an authentic or ethnic food in different parts of the United States. So they are growing, but at the same time, we felt that there is limited research about food trucks, especially the ways that customers perceive or their attitude toward food trucks, especially ethnic food trucks. So that was the main reason behind this. And originally, we wanted to visit different ethnic food trucks, and then because of COVID, we couldn't do that. I mean, we couldn't collect data from the real setting. But yeah, that was the main reason or the main story behind this. I'm not sure if Dr. Ta want to add something.
Yeah, if I may add something, is that Kian and I, we've been chatting about what kind of research project on food truck for a while. And early last year, before the COVID-19 hit the US, we actually met a faculty member who's an OSU alumni talking about they're going to have a food truck on campus. And we thought, wow, that was an amazing opportunity, so that maybe we can even do some field experiment, or getting the actual feedback, from the customers who are actually waiting in line, or maybe just try the food and we can serve it, and that would be a perfect population to help with our study. But as everybody knows, pandemic, it changed every works and lives around the world. So we were not able to do that on site, but rather collecting data from online. But at the same time, I think pandemic also helped the food truck to grow. If we think back, last year, a lot of restaurants, my friends in the industry, it's like they have to close their doors and reopen, and they have to be very adaptive. They have to make sure that they do everything they can to ensure their business, afloat in a business. But with food truck, they are basically, restaurant on the wheels. They are highly mobile. They can go to places not every restaurant can go. And so I think that was research-wise, but also industry-wise. Last year was a great timing that we, actually get to have the opportunity to spend a little bit more time looking to like food truck. What does that mean for our industry? And also, what are some major factors that influence consumers, their decision-making process? So that was a little bit background story that I like to share with the audience.
Yeah, I resonate with a lot of what you said there, and certainly food trucks have that lower barrier to entry, and it makes it easier for people to get into or to just try things. I mean, I think that's the other thing, right? You can much more easily and cheaply try something and it fail and move on with life with
and that's right.
Then going into $500,000 or $750,000 worth of debt to open a brick and mortar place, for sure.
Exactly.
Of course.
All right, so we're looking at basically how a food truck operator, and specifically an ethnic food truck operator, could what they could do or how their authenticity of their food and their experience would impact their potential guests' satisfaction, and later on the possible word of mouth and how memorable their dining experience was. That's basically what we're looking at here?
Yes.
Exactly, and also the effect of authenticity perception on different dimensions of quality perceptions also.
Oh, okay. All right. So
that was another.
So how their perception of whether something's authentic or not would influence whether they think it's high quality or not.
Exactly. And then if they will be satisfied by that or not.
Gotcha. Okay, wonderful. All right, so to frame this as researchers, obviously theory matters, and all of our papers get published. We have to frame it with some sort of theory, and y'all use expectation disconfirmation theory, EDT. I've actually come across EDT on the show before. We were talking about food safety and how guests were satisfied or not, actually, based on cleanliness and that sort of thing. So y'all use this theory to frame your research. Why? Why did you choose EDT, and how is that useful in framing your research?
So actually, the reason that people decide to try ethnic food trucks, they want to have an authentic perception, right? Authentic experience, authentic and high quality dining experience. So by adding or by using expectancy disconfirmation theory, we wanted to know, after that customers dine at an ethnic food truck, they will compare their experience with their expectations, right? Their expectations of having an authentic dining experience. If their authenticity perception matches with their expectations, then they will be satisfied. If not, then they will be dissatisfied. And then this satisfaction or dissatisfaction would affect their behavioral intentions, memorable dining experience, and also word of mouth. So as I mentioned, the main reason that we used expectancy disconfirmation theory was that since customers, we have different types of food trucks, but when they want to try ethnic food truck, they want to have an authentic dining experience. So then they will compare their real experience with their expectations. And then based on that, they will be that satisfied or dissatisfied.
And I think if we step back a little bit, when you see the major variables of authenticity, quality perception, satisfaction, and also other, positive outcomes for their, behavior, I think when you have quality and satisfaction, it's really hard, to walk away from EDT. I think that just framed it well. It's a very, straightforward theory to provide very strong theoretical support for our conceptual framework. I think that's, from the research perspective and also from, the variables we have in the model, it makes a lot of sense that we apply EDT to support our model.
And from there, so not only did you use EDT, but you also were looking at different dimensions of quality, and you used some past research to kind of categorize or differentiate between core quality factors, external quality factors, and delivery quality factors. I was looking at my notes there. So in the context of a food truck, what would be a core factor, external factor, delivery factor? I'm curious as to how you kind of separate those out and how that applies to a food truck here.
Yeah, so when we decide, or from the literature, we found that quality perception is a very important variable here. Then we try to find something to measure, some measurement items that can measure quality perception the best. So because of the specific characteristics of ethnic food trucks, we found these core, external, and delivery quality as the most applicable measurement items for our study. The reason is, so firstly, core quality in our study refers to the food truck's main product, food and beverages, right? The quality of food and beverages that they offer. External quality refers to something that is visible to their customers. For example, the way that they present their food to their customers, the variety of menu items. something that is visible to the customers. And then lastly, external quality is about the way or how efficient they can deliver food to their customers. The reason that we chose this is that, as I mentioned, food trucks are different than brick and mortar restaurants. For example, when we talk about external quality, as you know, food trucks are mobile, right? They travel to different places. They serve food in different places. So the possibility that they serve first-time customers is high. So they deal with many first-time customers. And then customers, when they want to choose a food truck, for example, external quality, like the food presentation, or something that they see food trucks and then they compare a specific food truck with other food trucks might affect their behavior and intentions, might motivate them to choose one food truck over the others. So that's why external quality, for example, plays an important role. Or delivery quality, as you know, food trucks, they have a limited seating capacity, right? So food trucks customers, they had to interact with the food trucks chefs, with other customers. And then if they want to wait a lot, there is a long wait for them, they might not choose a food truck. So the way that they deliver their food and then how efficient they deliver food plays an important role in customers' perceptions regarding the food truck's quality. And the same thing for the core quality. So that's why we differentiated these three dimensions of quality, and we wanted to see which dimension has the most predictive or most important role here.
I think that also goes back to the theory that we utilize to support the research. It's a lot to do with the expectation, how consumers they see for the food trucks, and certainly they don't expect all the similar qualities or like products or maybe the service when they go into like a brick and mortar restaurants. And recently I got a chance, actually just this past weekend, I went to Oklahoma City to try the food from the food truck I interviewed a couple of weeks ago. And their food truck, it looks like it's like a B-box, like a radio. And like from maybe a half mile away, you can see the food truck. It's just so eye-catching, you catch the eyeballs. And the other aspect I want to bring here is that, before we actually get to, try the food, how we assess the food is based on, our different senses. I mean, visual is definitely certainly one of them. And when Kian and I, and also our collaborator, when we're thinking about the measures, we're trying to get away, from like a one-size-fits-all, those type of very general measurements. I think in terms of research, one of our great, researcher in our field, Dr. Li Miao, who's in Macau right now, she always talk about, the concept and also the context. It should be a great marriage, right? The concept and context should match. So that's why we try to find a nuance, in the measurements, try to differentiate that into like three different, items so that we can better, gauge what is the variable we're trying to measure here. Otherwise, is that general? Then we don't think that really fits the food truck, research context.
Understood. All right. And then you add one more layer of complexity to your study, which is measuring risks and how risks play a role here. I had to smile as I was reading your paper because so I'm originally from the South, well, I guess East Texas area, and in the Houston restaurant scene where I worked for a number of years. Lots of people referred to food trucks at the time, and this was a while ago, as roach coaches, right? Not exactly the descriptors that we want associated with food preparation, and certainly the food truck industry, right? They don't want to. They aspire to something much greater than that, of course. So talk to us about the perceived risk factor here. You broke it down into three factors or three aspects of risk again. Briefly, can you tell me what those were? And again, why did you bring that in? And then after that, then we'll get into the meat of it, what you actually found.
Sure. So as you mentioned, we add perceived risk to our study. And then we try to measure perceived risk or to check the moderation effects of different dimensions of perceived risk separately, which is different than many previous studies. So many previous studies, they just use the perceived risk as one variable and then check the impact of that variable. But in our study, the reason that we added perceived risk to our study and then we checked the moderation effects of perceived risk was that, as you mentioned, so many customers, they believe that, firstly, they think that the food that is new or novel is riskier because they don't have much information about that. Secondly, many previous studies, they showed that people believe that the street food is riskier and maybe it's not healthy because food trucks, they have access to limited facilities, right? To preserve, to cook food and all of those stuff. So perceived risk for sure plays an important role in the street food context and specifically in the food truck context. So that's why we added perceived risk to our study. And as you mentioned, we use three different dimensions of perceived risk in our study: hygienic risk, health risk, and also environmental risk. So we wanted to differentiate the moderation effects of all these three different dimensions and then compare the moderation effects. So for the results, I think we will discuss it later on how what we found based on the moderation effect of perceived risk. But this was the whole idea behind this.
Yeah, I think, back home in Taiwan, that's my home country. I mean, I grew up with eating, street vendors like food trucks. It's so, prevalent and popular, in my home country. And when I come to the United States, I see somebody, in a different operational, type. But I think people do have different expectations, and they perceive, like food truck, a little bit riskier, especially when it comes to ethnic food, because that's something really novel and they don't really have an anchor in their mind how they compare that. And the other thing I want to relate is that, whenever you go to like maybe Disneyland or maybe like a county fair, like one thing I feel is really, really evil is the scent, from the funnel cake.
Oh, yes.
It's like it
Oh,
smells
yeah.
so good, they deep fried it. And certainly if we can relate that type of experience, as a consumer, we certainly want to know what's the nuance, between different types of risk when we, visit a food truck and trying to try the food. So basically, we're trying to put ourselves in the consumer's, side of the perspective. But we want to make sure it's relevant and not just something that, researchers, we live in the ivory tower of the academia. I want to make sure that it's still close to the industry and to the real world scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally understand that. It's easy for us in academics to just end up just thinking about the theoretical side and not the practical side on a regular basis, which is one of the reasons why I have researchers on the show, specifically to force you to apply these things as we go along. Okay, so let's dive into what you found. In my mind, I think of what can we do to get guests to have this memorable experience and spread positive word of mouth. So what did you find? What you got for me?
So for the results, we found that authenticity perceptions, customers' authenticity perceptions affects their quality perceptions. That was the first finding. Secondly, our results showed that customers' authenticity perceptions and also quality perceptions would affect their satisfaction. Also, the customers' dining satisfaction has actually mediates the relationship between authenticity perceptions and customers' memorable dining experience. So when we talked about memorable dining experience, something that we found that it was very interesting was that authenticity, when customers, they have an authentic dining experience, if that authenticity perceptions enhance their satisfaction, then the likelihood that they will remember that experience is higher. So that was actually the indirect relationship between authenticity perceptions and also memorable dining experience. And another part of our results showed that memorable dining experience also mediates the relationship between dining satisfaction and customers' word of mouth. So if they remember an experience, if they are satisfied and then they remember that experience, it is more likely that they spread a positive word of mouth about ethnic food trucks. When we talk about different dimensions of quality, something that we found, which was interesting, was that amongst three different dimensions of quality, external quality had the strongest predicting power. So it's external quality, and then core quality, and then delivery quality. Although all of them significantly affects the customer's general quality perceptions. For the risk, the results of our study showed that hygienic risk is the only dimension that moderates the relationship between authenticity perceptions and dining satisfaction, as well as quality perceptions and dining satisfaction. Health risk and environmental risk only moderates the relationship between quality perceptions and dining satisfaction. I mean, later on, we will discuss that why we think that's why health risk and environmental risk do not moderate the relationship between authenticity perceptions and quality perception. This was actually the summary of our results. And as I mentioned, as Dr. Tao also mentioned, the main purpose of our study was to helping the industry, helping ethnic food trucks to grow. As I mentioned, the owners of ethnic food trucks, most of them, they are people from underrepresented groups, immigrants of the destination. So our results wanted to help them to create a memorable dining experience for their customers while considering other variables.
Mm-hmm. I think one interesting thing that in our model is that we put a memorable dining experience after satisfaction, and that serves a mediator between satisfaction and word of mouth. But in some research, they might have different viewpoints. They will say that consumers, they might have a memorable dining experience, and later on they are super satisfied with that experience. Then they spread the word of mouth. But in our research, at least in the food truck context, satisfaction comes first, and after that, that's a memorable dining experience. Then they share information with people around it, or maybe on social media. And I think it's a very straightforward. We don't have like fancy variable that we don't even know what's the definition for that, but rather it's pretty straightforward. And I think I want to echo what Kian said earlier. If we are allowed to have the opportunity and we can share that with industry partners, I think there are some key takeaways that they can get from these research project and actually apply that to their business and keep booming in the US, so that we have a more interesting foodscape in different parts of the country.
Awesome. Exactly, a great point.
Yeah. So, and Kian, as you're talking, for those of you that are listening in, as Kian's talking, he's using his hands to kind of outline this process. And if you have the opportunity, certainly you could reach out to either one of the or any of the authors here. I'm sure they would share the PDF with you if you're listening in or watching and want to see this. But they've got this really nice, it's almost like a flow chart. It's their model in academic terms that shows, right, that you've got the perception of authenticity first, and that flows into satisfaction, which flows into memorable dining experience, which flows into positive word of mouth. That's that's kind of the almost the flow chart here that's going on. Again, it's more of an academic model, but that's the basic understanding there. And so from a very like an operational standpoint, the starting point is at the beginning, which is how do I create authentic experiences, which your study didn't specifically address. How do you create them? What you were assessing is if it's authentic or if it's perceived to be authentic, what's the impact of that, right?
Yes.
That's right. Yeah, because we ask customers' perceptions about authenticity or authentic experience. The purpose of this study was not about finding the ways that food trucks can create an authentic, positively affect customers' authenticity perceptions.
Awesome. Okay. And I'm also curious as I was reading your paper. So y'all use a definition for ethnic food trucks as, and I'm going to quote this, a food truck that serves food which is geographically or ethnically linked to a culture different than a customer's culture. And in digging into your data, I was looking at the breakdown of the different types of food trucks that your participants visited. Looks about 50% visited some form of a Mexican food truck, and 10% visited an American food truck. And obviously, I'm from the United States, and so to me, American, that's my home culture in a way. But I'm curious about that 10%. I mean, what was the perception, the perspective there? Was it that the people that visited those were from a different country or different culture, and so American was ethnic to them? Or did you deal with that data in a different way? I'm just kind of curious about how y'all handled that data and how that parsed out.
Oh, thank you for mentioning that. I think that's a great point. It means that you read our article very good.
I try.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, that's a great point. Firstly, we couldn't find any definition for ethnic food trucks from previous studies. So we used the definition for ethnic restaurants, and then we extended that definition for to define ethnic food trucks in our study. But at the same time, when we were collecting data, we asked our participants to self-define the ethnic food truck, because as you know, the MTurk participants, they're coming from diverse cultural background. And then if we define it in a way that it's different than from their definition, it might affect their perceptions. So they self-defined the ethnic food truck. And as you mentioned, 10% of our participants, they chose American food as one type of ethnic food, right? We didn't exclude those because, as I mentioned, the MTurk participants are coming from diverse backgrounds. So those people, we assumed that those people are people that they are not American in culture. So they perceive American food as an ethnic food because they chose American food as one of the ethnic foods that they had. So that's why we thought that it's not good that we exclude those participants.
I think you kind of like talk about the pros and cons, using different approach in a screening process, how we select that. At the same time, I also believe it actually represents, the diversity in the U.S. population, and also how one actually, recognize, his or her, own cultural background, how their familiarity with a particular type of food. So I guess it comes down to, how do you identify yourself? Like even, this is probably my, 10th year in the United States, but still every day I chat with my colleagues, work with my students, they always introduce me something new, and vice versa. I introduce something, new to them. So I think that's the beauty of that. But I think Nathan did homework really well, dive into the data and were able to point out that. And the other thing I want to talk a little bit more about, even though our paper, we didn't really get a chance to specify, so exactly how do we do to enhance the perception of authenticity? I think, in academia, we always, it's going to be the future study, how we do it. Yeah, but at least if we can, piggyback from the quality perspective, at least from the core product, food and beverage, delivery process, it's going to be quick for the food truck industry, and also, the external quality. I think one thing going on for the food truck is that they utilize more and more digital menus, and how you better utilize those, visual cues so that you give them some hints and help consumers to make decisions. I think that's also a very good way and also very practical. It doesn't cost you a fortune to create a sense of authenticity. Even just the color, the color and also the utensils you use, those can be some ideas to supply to the food truckers so that they can, try to create, deliver a better sense of authenticity.
Yeah, and also playing some music that goes back to some food truck cultural background when they serve food. I think that's also a great idea to positively affect customers' authenticity perceptions.
But again, these are beyond the scope. So
the scope of this study.
We cannot say we have like solid data to back out, but based on our understanding of what's going on in the industry, as well as the current literature, these are some things that, the industry partners, they might be able to experiment.
Your ideas from what you've seen, these are not data-based yet, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally get that. All right, so you mentioned that hygiene risk did play a moderating effect here. So, and that's the idea of having food that is, safely prepared is kind of food safety risks and that sort of thing. But health risk, which if I'm remembering correctly, was more along the lines of, is the food good for me or not from a, is it fatty or not, or fried, or, those types of things that had less of an impact. And environmental risk, I thought that was super interesting that you included that because it makes sense, right? A food truck uses gas or diesel or propane and possible emissions, or you've also got
single-use plastics.
Yeah, exactly. Disposables, although it seems like everyone's using disposables now because of COVID. But it seemed like hygiene risk was the one that really was supported. So talk to me about that. And as you talk to me about that, any ideas that came out of your research for operators, how they can make sure that they are communicating that to the guests, so that they can benefit best from this research?
Yeah, of course. So as you mentioned, for the relationship between authenticity perceptions and satisfaction, hygienic risk was the only dimension that moderates this relationship. We think, because this is just our understanding, that when customers try to choose ethnic food trucks, the main purpose maybe is to having an authentic food, right? Having an authentic experience. So they might lower their expectations regarding to, as you mentioned, having a fatty food or something that is not healthy, because they do not expect a food truck, an ethnic food truck, serve healthy food at the same time an authentic food. So they might lower that expectations. They might not expect, it goes back to, again, to EDT. They might not expect the food trucks to serve a healthy food. That's why maybe health risk does not play a role here. For environmental risk, at the same thing. So since they know that food trucks, they have access to limited facilities, so they do not expect them to consider environmental risks such as food waste, such as you mentioned, fuel use, or using some disposables. All of those. So they might lower these expectations for these types of the two types of risks, but at the same time, hygienic risk is important to them because it's about their health, right? They might give it's related to foodborne illness. So this is important, but the other two dimensions might not be that important, or they might lower the expectations regarding those two types of risks. For the ethnic food truck owners or food truck owners, we think that if they can find some ways to assure their customers that they are considering different dimensions of risk, especially health risk, hygienic risk is very important. For example, getting some certificates or showing that all the employees, they have food serve-safe certificate, or make something visible to their customers to assure them that they are considering all of those things. Being transparent about their operations. For example, how they wash their hands. Show customers or assure them that they care about this, how they store food in their operation. All of these things, they might help customers to make decisions, or they might positively affect their repurchase intentions, word of mouth behavior. So so finding some ways for food truck owners to lower or lower customers' risk perceptions would help a lot in this, based on our findings.
I think I wouldn't say lower, but rather prioritizing the what is needed to better the performance, or maybe helping the consumers to make decisions. And that's why we have like 3 different dimensions from the perceived risk, and only one of them, hygienic risk, has a significant moderating effect for 2 relationships. So obviously, hygienic risk is among the most important, plays the most important role in that. Not saying that the other two are not important, but when you are a business owner, I mean, my family always own a restaurant, even nowadays. So with like, if you are like smaller, business owners, you own a restaurant, you have so many things you need to accomplish, but with limited resources, like what comes first on top of the list? I think that's important. So if we can, find this, is that when Kian talked to me and say, hey, Dr. Ta, only like one moderator, work out for the both of relationship. I say, awesome, that's great finding, because we can help the operators to prioritize, food safety, most important, there's no negotiation. It has to be safe and sanitized in the proper ways, especially last year. It's a COVID. Even now, we're trying to, put the COVID behind us, but still, that's really important from the consumers. And other aspects, they are, less of priority, but, it's the more the merrier, if you can get this done, that certainly helps the business.
Presumably, in reading your research, even though you focus on food truck owners, couldn't your findings extend to ethnic restaurants? I'm curious about how your data, you think, and I know this is more of a guess, or your informed intuition, your educated intuition here, but like, could this extend to brick and mortar or virtual brands or some of these other business models?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So the results of our study, our findings showed that authenticity perception plays an important role here, because it affects customer satisfaction, their quality perceptions, and also it would affect their memorable dining experience. So even brick and mortar restaurants, especially those ethnic restaurants, they also have to try to create an authentic or positively affect customers' authenticity perceptions. Because in some cases, maybe customers perceive ethnic food trucks more authentic, because they see the chef, they see everything. I mean, they see the operation. So at the same time, to find some ways for ethnic food trucks to compete with ethnic food trucks, they also need to try to positively affect customers' authenticity perception. It can be different ways, it can be different than ethnic food trucks, but affecting the customer's authenticity perception is a key role, is a key point here. And also, I can say that's a competitive advantage for ethnic restaurants, that they can focus on the perceived risk dimensions compared to food trucks. Maybe it's harder although ethnic food trucks, they can be very safe, but as I mentioned, they might struggle with assuring customers that their food is safe. But for ethnic restaurants, they can focus on their food safety to compete with ethnic food trucks. They show that, all of these are considered their operation, because then customers, if they want to try an ethnic food, they might choose brick and mortar restaurants over ethnic food trucks, especially as Dr. Tao mentioned, after COVID. So I think these results are also applicable to brick and mortar restaurants or different types of restaurants as well.
I want to add a little bit here, is that in general, in industry terms, it's almost like a flow chart in our conceptual model. So in general, my educational guess is it might work, but again, food truck, brick and mortar restaurant, virtual brand like Ghost Kitchen and things like that, these are different beasts. So we and again, personally, I'm against one size fits all. So I'm assuming that there will be some boundary effect. There should be a boundary. And if we think about how consumers, they need to make some effort, to go to like food truck, because they need to leave their residence, leave their office, and actually physically be there. But when they're ordering online, maybe that's because of convenience. So what customers are looking for might be different. And also the tactics that these different industry partners, virtual or maybe food truck or brick and mortar, I think the tactics will also be very different, because when you're online, basically you are relying on your cell phone, relying on the your screen. Some of the things that we discussed earlier, how we can better strengthen the perception of authenticity, it may not work in different settings. Yeah, so that's something I want to kind of like a draw line, not expanding our research beyond what we did.
Okay, fair enough. And I mean, that leads directly into my next question is based on your research and the limitations of it. Obviously, this is focused on food trucks, and so did not focus on brick and mortar or other models. What else is there for us to know, or what's the next step in this research? Maybe you've already started it, or what would you want to do next in this research focus?
So I would like to happy to take the lead on these questions. Since Kian said, "Hey, could you take this one?" Sure. So I think what I'm already doing is that, as I said, just recently interviewed very successful food truck owners in Oklahoma. They actually started a business last year, and just within 1 year, they become the #1 vegan restaurant. Yeah, but it's a food truck. I should say it's a #1 food truck in Oklahoma, which is very impressive. So we'd like to see what are some of their strategies, especially they are selling a very unique product, plant-based proteins. So I think that, interviewing successful food truck owners, that's something that we're already doing. And other aspects, as we mentioned earlier, originally we're trying to have a few experiments. We can manipulate some different factors, maybe how we can enhance the perception for authenticity. That can be something can be done if we have the capacity to do a field experiment. The other one is that that's going back to my research interest of utilizing big data analytics or maybe social media data. I think getting the actual feedback from the consumers, whatever they share on the review website, their personal social media. I think it always also help the industry to learn from the consumers. By the end of the day, we can provide the best product based on our understanding, but we need to have the consumers who are actually making the decision if they're going to buy it. So it's decided by the market. So these are some future directions, and we invite scholars, industry partners. If you guys are interested in this type of research, please feel free to reach out to Kian, to myself, even Nathan. Maybe we should find some food trucks in Houston so that we can collect some data and work together. I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if you're an operator listening in and you want to partner with Kian or Willie, reach out to me, leave a comment on YouTube, or reach out to them directly. Their LinkedIn profiles are in the description. So if you want to reach out to them, you absolutely can. Kian, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to add one point here. Another aspect that we think that it's a good idea to think about it for future research is considering people's cultural background. Because, for example, for me, that coming from another country, my perception or my understanding of food trucks might be different than people here. So, and it's the same from people from different countries. I mean, for example, the way that I perceive risk might be different than other people. So, I mean, doing this research in different countries or considering people's cultural background would be, I think, helpful as well for the quality perception for different variables that we use in our study, because food trucks are different in different countries.
So many possibilities to keep investigating here. All right. So if each one of you were the owner or operator of a food truck, how would you be using this research to improve your operation? Let's, I'll make you apply this right now. If you owned it, how would you be using this?
So firstly, if I want to have an ethnic food truck, I want to run an ethnic food truck, the main purpose is authenticity, right? Authenticity means if I want to serve an authentic food, I have to serve something that I'm totally aware of the cultural background on that. I know different aspects of that food. Something that is not, for example, for me, if I want to run an Asian food trucks, when I don't have any background for that. So it's not possible. So the first thing is customers that they choose to dine at ethnic food trucks, they want to have an authentic perceptions. So I will think about the ways that I can create authenticity, authentic experience for my customers. And I think I shouldn't just follow others. I shouldn't follow other food trucks, just see how they are doing. Based on different cultural backgrounds, you can find yourself or find something that is completely related to your culture. When you're serving food, when you want to run a food truck, and it can be completely different than other food trucks. So that's the main aspect here, serving something that is authentic. And secondly, based on our study, I will focus on perceived risk. As I mentioned, finding some ways to ensure customers that the food that I'm serving is safe to them. Again, this can be done by different strategies. And as I mentioned, I just not should try to follow other food trucks to see what they are doing. I should come up with something that I think it's the best for my operation, because different ethnic foods, they have the way that you serve different ethnic foods, the way that you prepare those foods are different. So all of these authenticity perception, customers perceive risk should be related to the type of food that you are serving.
Mm-hmm. So piggyback on Kian's comments. I think the first one is find your niche market. Find your niche market, like whatever you believe is it's really good. Don't be afraid. Give it a try. And I think one thing, one advantage of the food truck is that it's highly flexible. And the cost of you trying a new item, just a testing menu, maybe going on for 2 weeks, it's relatively much lower compared to the brick and mortar restaurants. And the other part is about the quality. So we have the core quality, delivery, external quality. Certainly, I would say that in any type of food and service businesses, your quality of your product, main product, like the food, the drink, these are still very, very important. So these are the basics. So if we do this well, then external quality, and certainly that can help us, the music, the sound, the sphere, the ambience, and things like that. That will also be helping not just the quality, but also the perception of authenticity. And the other part is about word of mouth that we didn't really get a chance to really talk about a lot. But if you do try to do your best, in terms of creating a authentic dining experience, you focus on the quality of your product, whether that's tangible or intangible, then the marketing will come. If you still take advantage of technology like social media, I think your customers, they'll be willing to be your ambassador and talk about good things about how they love your food, how they like your brand, how attentive your staff are. So I think so again, 3 takeaways. I mean, niche market, the food, the quality of your service, and the last one is the marketing aspect of the word of mouth. I think that's something that the industry partners they might that might stimulate some thoughts that what they can actually apply to their operations.
Wonderful. So as I'm trying to think about all that y'all said here, definitely the perceptions of authenticity matter, and it impacts both the perceptions of quality as well as the the satisfaction of the dining experience there. That satisfaction of the experience can lead to it being memorable, and being memorable can lead to positive word of mouth. And obviously, word of mouth marketing is one of the best kinds out there, at least from what I've seen and learned. I'm not a marketing guru, but having people talk positively about your operation is a really positive thing that I absolutely should be aware of. Risks that consumers might consider, and for a food truck, it seems like the primary one is the hygiene risk, or food safety type things, which most operators I've come in contact with do a really good job of that. Seems like it's mostly about making sure that your guests are aware of that, so there's that the perception there about handling food safety well. And when it comes to whether this data could be applied to other models, whether it's brick and mortar or virtual brands, etc., while it makes sense, intuitive sense, that some of the findings about authenticity would apply, we don't really know. That's data that needs to be collected. And certainly if you're an operator listening to this and you'd like to collaborate, or another researcher you'd like to collaborate with these authors, reach out, because they would be open to that. Wonderful. Thank you y'all so much for the time to share your research and talk about this with me.
Thank you, Nathan, for creating this great opportunity for us to share our research with others. And I think this is certainly a great platform to exchange ideas.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting us. It was great. Yeah, it is a great start.
Wonderful. You're very welcome. And thank you to those of you who are tuning in. If you have questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. Ciao.